Hi, I'm Shelly Jo, and welcome to my show. Today I'm talking to the original amino acid lady, Julia Ross. Hey guys, it's Shelly Jo here with Shelly Jo Hypno Aminos and Future Brain, and Change Life. And I'm here with my friend, Miss Julia Ross, who is the original amino acid lady. We're here in La Quinta, California. We've been here for a conference, um, laughing and talking, and it's been fabulous. And I wanted to just kind of have a recap of what this event has been like. We came down. I met Julia down here to go to a addiction conference for those who work with those who are in recovery, the actual therapists and the programs for California, and it's been amazing. I got to listen to Julia speak, and I'm gonna let her tell you a few things. But the coolest part about this is we allowed people to trial the amino acids, and the response was incredible. Which was your favorite one, Julia?
There were so many. It was interesting because I think of women as being particularly aware and responsive to these nutrients when we trial them. But in this case, the most responsive people were guys. And we had several men who were incredibly fatigued or incredibly stressed. There was one very draggy guy who, while the amino acid powder was absorbing with a little water in his mouth, and he was kind of swishing it around, he suddenly jumped up from his chair and came around and started looking at our materials on the table. And so I said to him, did something just happen that made you able to get up and jump around and so forth? And he looked sort of blank, and he realized, yes, I really feel good. And that happened several times. And then you had, we started calling him the Energizer Bunny. Because,
yeah, it was Jeff, wasn't it?
Yeah.
He was so funny. This guy, he came and we let him trial the tyrosine, and he came back so fast, and he was like giddy and so excited and so full of energy, and he's like, I can't believe how amazing these are, and he wouldn't stop talking about them.
No.
All weekend. It was just so much fun, because literally you take the amino acid, you put it, when you're trialing them, you just open up the capsule, you put it in your mouth, you add a little bit of water, swish it around, and the responses are incredible.
And that's because the mouth, the oral cavity, as they call it, is so absorbent, and everything that gets absorbed in the mouth and this soft inner tissue goes pretty directly to the brain. Whereas if you swallow something, it has to go down in the digestive tract and then back around into the brain. So we get this very, very quick. I mean, it usually isn't more than a couple of minutes. Occasionally we have somebody who has to have 2 doses before they could feel it, but it's very rare. So that gives everybody concerned confidence that this is for real. This is not just what Julia and Shelly are talking about. It's what's happening to me, and that's invaluable. Because people are bombarded with, do this, do that, whether it's medication or a new diet or, everything on the internet. So this is for real. And you can order trialing kits at the shop on my website. And that email address is juliarosscures.com, and just go to the shop.
And it's amazing. Oh, it was so much fun. We had a couple of them. I gave them my GABA powder, and you just see them calm, and you just see like the stress leave their body, their shoulders drop. It was so much fun. So I'm gonna pause for a second. Let's talk to Julia about why they work and where she came to learn this stuff. All right, I'm gonna talk to Julia about how she found out about this. She's going to tell you a little bit about herself and why she even thought this was important in the first place.
Well, let's talk about why I thought this conference was important. Why speak at this one? You know, there are so many conferences I could be speaking at and have spoken at, but it's been a long time since I've spoken to the addiction professionals who are struggling. You know, every year the burden is greater. One of the women here was saying that every month her county gets 300 new drunk drivers who are mandated to take their education program, and more, you know, maybe lose their license, at least temporarily, and so forth. Just to give you an idea of the severity of this thing and how many professionals are in the field now to try and help. So I wanted to come to this conference, tell them about my experience working with addiction and why all I talk about now is amino acids and addiction. So what I told them about was that I'd been kind of a pioneer at a marvelous nonprofit in a 4-story Victorian in San Francisco that housed alcoholic men, and three great meals a day. Well, conventionally good for that period of time. You know, it opened in the 50s, and it was in the late 70s when I became an intern there for my graduate psych program. And we added just a fabulous array of counseling techniques, you know, just marvelous, to this stable environment that they had. They were required to have a job or be in school, and we were thrilled with what we were doing. After 7 years, I became the director of a new outpatient program which I founded, spread into 3 counties very quickly. It was for adolescents who were starting to have drug problems. Very successful. And then in the mid-'80s, the crack cocaine epidemic hit, and we had no success with anybody. The kids weren't using it yet, but the adults who came in, they would come in for an initial assessment and session, and they'd never come back. And that was true everywhere in the country. People would even leave a deposit, you know, come into an inpatient program, leave a deposit of $10,000, and walk out of there within days. And there were about at least 40% of them who were doing that.
Wow.
Even leaving that much money behind. So they just could not recover using the techniques that we thought were so great. And they were with alcoholics, but crack cocaine was a whole different drug. And so all of us in the field got very depressed and started thinking about other careers. And all of a sudden we started to hear that there was a touring seminar that consisted of neuroscientists who were specialists in addiction. And so we signed up, you know, we showed up, and they said, basically, it's not your fault. You know, what you're doing is great, but it is not addressing the core of the problem. And they said, we're the experts in that, and we can tell you that core of the problem is in the brain. In a way, that made us more depressed because we were no way brain scientists. You know, had no idea how to solve a problem that originated in the brain. But one of these scientists, Kenneth Blum, ended up doing a number of studies and lecturing along with the others, but he was willing to tell us the real story, which is that although it sounds intimidating, the fact that the brain is the seat of addiction really is not a big deal, because there are only 5 sites in the brain that control the neurotransmitters and their blood sugar source in the brain that program all of our emotions and our appetite.
Oh.
So that was good news, that he was trying to reassure us it wasn't as complicated as all that. And he said the really important thing is that these 5 sites operate on a very simple nutritional diet. They just need 5 different amino acids. And he was using a mix of the amino acids in his studies and showing very good success. In terms of cocaine, he was able to bring the AWOL rate, the disappearance rate, down from 40% within the first week to 4%.
Wow.
Which is a huge
That's
accomplishment. So at that point, I decided that I had just hired a nutritionist. She was just going to talk about diet, but it turned out she was sophisticated and knew about supplements. I said, research these amino acids he's talking about. They're available in any health food store, and now, of course, online. And she did, and she said, there's absolutely no danger. And I said, well, let's get Ed in here, who was a guy who had been a bodybuilder, was very health-oriented, but then got into crack cocaine and was just not making it. We were his 5th or 6th program. So we asked him, would he be a guinea pig? And he said, absolutely. He said, I used to use some sort of amino acid blend as a bodybuilder. So we had him come in. At that time, we weren't doing these trials. So we told him, this is an experiment. We don't know, have we got the dosing right, whatever. And we gave him our best shot. And he came back a week later and said, this is the first time in 5 years that I haven't had crack in a week.
Wow. That's powerful. That's powerful, Julia.
That was so powerful that I dropped everything else and read everything I could, contacted Kenneth Blum and a few other people who were already using the aminos. And rather than use a sort of a formula, a mix of aminos, we immediately launched into using the aminos that their symptoms called for. And that has been a departure from, this. Kenneth Blum is a scientist, not a clinician, so we were able to fine-tune things and use the individual amino acids, which has been a much, much more successful strategy. And so that's what we're doing now. At my clinic, we're just focusing on food addiction. My most recent book is called The Craving Cure, which is just about the recovery from the food addiction that is really plaguing the world at this point. It is accounting for, our epidemics of overweight, obesity, and diabetes, and diet-caused cancers. We're really at the mercy. If it weren't for the aminos, we would be hopelessly at the mercy of the junk food industry, which was established in the 1970s when the tobacco industry bought up the snack industry and started to create edible drugs.
I don't think people know that.
Well, it's one of the reasons I wanted to bring that up, because they don't. We think, oh, they're cute, they're fun, they're delicious. What could be wrong? Yes, they're causing weight gain. Yes, they're causing diabetes, but we can't possibly live without them.
Right.
And even the diabetes doctors say, well, we can't ask our patients to live without them. But they have to ask their patients to live without them if they're going to save their lives.
Right.
But they don't have the tools. They're
Right.
using medicines which don't really correct the deficiencies in the brain chemistry. So we just feed the brain in whatever the 5 sites is empty in a particular person, and those cravings disappear. And so whether it's for sugar, starch, caffeine, chocolate, we can restore normal appetite for a healthy diet.
Right.
And so the only problem is a lot of people don't know what a healthy diet is because they maybe were born after 1970, where we were, we've been eating healthy foods, less and less often.
Right. That's true. I thought it was kind of fun at the conference, that lady that came up, and she said, I think she got glutamine, and she was talking about the brownie. And she said that she normally, during the breaks, they would have snacks. And they had these big brownies. And she said, normally I would take and eat the whole thing. And all I wanted was a bite. And then she's like, I didn't want any more. And that's what's really cool about them, is it makes it so that you can live and live your life, and you just don't feel the need.
Right. And and you actually enjoy the food.
Enjoy what you
healthy,
have.
which the cuisines of the world have are famous for our inventiveness, creating whatever we had. We made something delicious out of it, but it didn't include sugar for the most part, and that normal native appetite that we have comes into being, and we're very satisfied with healthy meals. So I hope that your listeners are listening.
Yeah, I hope they're listening to this, and how amazing the amino acids are. They're so simple. I had one of my friends say to me, she kind of made it similar to like Moses and he had a staff. And if you've read the story in the Bible about how there was a snake on the top of the staff, and all the people had to do was look up, and they would live. And they didn't. Some of them didn't. And she's like, sometimes this sounds so simple that people don't take it for serious. And so it's like, it can sound so simple and too good to be true, but it's amazing.
I sort of haunted by a woman who came up to us, and she was a little hesitant. She gave us her the amino acid therapy chart, which is actually a neurotransmitter deficiency list of symptoms, and she had filled it out, but on a scale of 0 to 10, everything was a 10.
Yeah, she's like, look at this paper.
5-part questionnaire, and so I asked her how long she'd been living with those kind of negative symptoms, and she told us that she had actually recently been diagnosed with a rapidly worsening case of MS. And so, I told her immediately that I have never trialed or recommended amino acids to anyone with MS. They just haven't come to see us at my virtual clinic. So that if she decided to trial or take aminos, it would be a complete experiment that I couldn't guarantee. Right. But she said, well, would a trial of one capsule of whatever I need hurt me? And I said, very unlikely.
Right.
So it only stays in the body for a few hours, and any immediate negative effect can be washed out by some vitamin C in a glass of water. So she decided to trial, and the problem was she had every single symptom, on the entire questionnaire. So I just talked to her about her discomfort. What were the things that were the most difficult, and it ended up being pain. She would even wake up in the night because her legs would be cramping and seizing, and it was painful. And but she experienced it throughout the day too. And she was clearly in a lot of emotional pain about this. She has 2 children, and so we trialed her on the amino acid that raises our endorphin levels, our natural, super potent, pain-killing, pleasure-producing neurotransmitters, the endorphins. And so she opened the capsule, and this particular one isn't particularly bad tasting. And she put a little bit of water in her mouth and swished it around and kept it in her mouth for a while, and then she swallowed it. And she didn't say anything. And So I waited a while, and then I said, "Are you feeling nothing, or you were so quiet, what's going on?" And she started to cry and said that the pain was gone. So we get these delightful surprises, so often when we're trialing either, somebody gets an immediate, within seconds response, or something like this that we've never experienced before with someone. It's just thrilling.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we'd had a couple that would give them some tryptophan and said, take it back to your hotel, see if it makes a difference and how your sleep is. And they came back and said, oh my gosh, I slept better last night than I had in a long time. There was this one lady, she was so cute. Her name was Layla. Was it Layla? Anyway, she was so funny because she comes in and she's like, oh my gosh. She said, I got home, I was at this conference all day long, I had all this energy, and my husband's like, aren't you ready to just relax and go to sleep? She's like, no, I got so much energy, I want to go to the casino. And so it was so funny. And that's the responses. And I was just giddy. I felt like it was like Christmas. Every minute they'd come up and I'd be like, oh my gosh. It was just so much fun to see the responses that these people would get. And sometimes it was instant. And sometimes it was a little bit, a couple of minutes. And other times they'd come back like an hour later and say, wow, I feel a difference.
Yeah.
And some of them, the difference wasn't as extreme. I mean, a couple of these cases were so funny because they were so extreme. And then the others would just come back and say, well, I feel like I was a little bit calmer. Or that I didn't have the brain fog. I could think a little bit more clearly. Mm-hmm. Or, I didn't feel like I had to sit and snack. I mean, there was one girl that said, when you're at these conferences, they've got bowls of candy all over. And even as they're sitting there eating during the conferences, they've got these big bowls of candy. And she said, I was so proud of myself because I didn't even have one. And normally, she said, it was right in front of me and I'd be eating them, and I didn't have that desire. She goes, I didn't even have any of them. And I thought, that's a big change.
And the reason that we're telling you this many stories, and this is just a drop in the bucket, there were so many people who came to the table. If Shelly had not been with me, I wouldn't have been able to handle it. But we were there after my talk, and then all the following day. And so at every break and at every meal, we would be inundated with people who wanted to try it, and they were hearing from each other. And so this is how we can make a real impact. They heard me, they liked my lecture, they were intrigued, but it wasn't until they actually started experiencing it that they thought, wow, this really might be something that would help. And we had an MD who came up who worked for the Betty Ford clinic for 14 years and then kind of quit in exhaustion and disgust because that was a very, very rigid program, and they just weren't acknowledging that what they were doing wasn't working. And she said that she was starting up her own boutique program in Palm Springs, and that she was going to, from the day one, include the Aminos.
Yeah, that was super cool. So it's like one person at a time is getting the word out. And, the cool thing I thought about this conference, Julia, is it was to help people who work with those who struggle with addiction. And so ultimately we want to help people who are struggling. But the people that we were helping were the caregivers.
Right.
And, sometimes as a caregiver, I know that when my daughter was struggling, my care was not my number one priority because I was in so much fear of her and her choices that I didn't take care of myself. And I didn't realize how depleted my own amino acids or my neurotransmitters were until I learned about this. And that was what was super cool, is being there, we were able to help those caregivers be able to care for themselves, or even their family, their children that are struggling.
Starting to struggle.
Their own family are struggling while they're out helping others who are, those are who are addiction who are struggling. That was really, really cool to see
So the
that.
people who are listening to this, may think, well, addiction doesn't apply to me. That sounds good, but the fact is, these people were no longer addicted to alcohol and drugs. They had neurotransmitter deficiency symptoms that were causing, fatigue, lack of attention, depression, anxiety, panic. So a whole array of what we call false moods that are just caused by neurotransmitter deficiency, not by life circumstances. It's a rare person these days, especially adults who don't have these deficiency symptoms, and that's why there are increasing rates of depression, anxiety, stress, mental illness, and there's really a solution to all
There
this.
is a solution,
at whatever degree the problem is.
Right, whatever it is. I know that when I first went out looking for information for my daughter, who at the time was struggling with a meth addiction and had been in jail 4 times, and I was at my wit's end, and when I was introduced to this information, first thing I did is somebody said, get Julia's book, The Mood Cure. And I did, and I read it, and I had hope, but I was also very angry. And when I took the class, that anger was so strong because I thought, my daughter struggled with anxiety at age 6. And I only did what I knew then. Put her on medication, got her to therapy. And when she turned to me at age 15 and said, I'm tired of being a doctor's science project, I just want to feel normal, I felt hopeless. I didn't know there was answers. And yet, I thought that this information was out in the 90s, but Julia actually said, 86? Was that the year?
Yeah.
1986 was the first time they started using
Well,
amino
this is the
acids.
first time I found out about them. The first study was done in the late 70s.
Wow. And my anger came because I thought, this information's been around for this long, and yet, why didn't I know about this when my daughter was 6 and struggling with anxiety, that I could have helped her brain so she wouldn't have turned to drugs and alcohol at 15. And that put me on a path to want to spread the word and to change people, give people an option.
Yeah.
Let them see that there are options. It's not an either or, it's an and. Right? It's not you have to do either go traditional this way or with medication or do amino acids and nutrition.
We have to be
and.
very careful of combining medication with the amino acids, but you can certainly do counseling and, a whole array of other things for yourself that can include this very simple and, by the way, temporary nutritional repair job. Only with kids, it's often just from under 14, couple weeks on these aminos.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
14 and older usually needs the same dosage as adults, but they only need it for a few months. Whereas adults who are, longer depleted typically take at least 3 months.
Right.
And more typically 6, and then just taper down off of them as they need less and less to support their brain. And the reason that people can get off of it so easily and not have to depend on it permanently is that it restores your appetite for healthful food, and that includes protein.
Protein, yeah.
And protein is our source of amino acids, so the more protein we get, the more amino acids are available to our brain as well as our muscles and the rest of the body.
Yeah.
So it's not just taking pills, it's being able to change your diet, which is an incredible revelation for most people who really feel trapped in their diets.
Mm-hmm. That is super amazing. And if you're interested, you guys, get Julia's book, The Mood Cure. The Craving Cure is her favorite.
Well, it's my most recent. And frankly, the food addiction, which is what it's all about, food craving, is much more deadly than alcohol and drug addiction. So, we're worldwide suffering from it terribly, physically and emotionally.
Yeah. And you want to get a hold of me, I'm Shelly Jo with Shelly Jo Hypno Aminos. also known as Amino Acid Lady, with the original Amino Acid Lady. You can find me on Shelly Jo at hypnominos.com or at hypnominos.com. Why? Life matters. Your life matters. Keep smiling and live boldly. Mwah. Bye.
Bye-bye.